This week on QDL, we look at gut reactions. You know what I mean, the advice we have all received and probably given about, just trust your instincts or go with your intuition, go with your gut. Our guest today tells us why your gut may not be the best thing to rely on when making business decisions. Find out why in 30 seconds. Welcome back to QDL. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. We all like to feel comfortable when making important decisions, especially important business decisions. And we feel best about decisions when they don't make us queasy, when they don't make upset our stomach, right? So we usually, when we tell somebody, go with your gut, what we are really saying is make the choice that you feel most comfortable with. Unfortunately, what we feel most comfortable with may be loaded with a lot of bias or personal baggage that has absolutely nothing to do with the decision at hand. And often when our gut is uncomfortable, it is not because the path you are thinking of taking is wrong. You're uncomfortable because the path you are faced with might be new, or it might be a departure from what a path you might normally take. Our next guest is author of Never Go With Your Gut, How Pioneering Leaders Make the Best Decisions and Avoid Business Disasters. I think the title says it all right there. Known as the disaster avoidance expert, Dr. Gleb Tsipursky is a former professor at Ohio State University, as well as CEO of the boutique consulting firm Disaster Avoidance Experts. Dr. Tsipursky, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be on the show. Thanks so much for inviting me on, Dirk.
No problem. In your book, Never Go With Your Gut, you point out the pitfalls of gut-based decision making. But I guess my question is, other than maybe some of the stuff I touched on in the intro there, why do we trust our gut so much, even sometimes when faced with facts that say maybe our gut choice may not be the right choice? Why do we do that?
Well, we've never been told to actually be suspicious of our gut and be curious about whether our gut makes the right decisions. We've been told that in many other areas except business. I mean, think about how many times you've been told not to take that third chocolate chip cookie. That second one is A-okay, but the third one is too much. We have learned that our gut reactions about taking chocolate chip cookies and not going out to exercise are probably bad for our physical health. But we haven't been taught that our gut reactions are bad for our health, the health of our business and the health of our careers and the health of our finances. And we make horrible decisions. People make horrible decisions all the time in the quality area and other areas because they haven't been taught to not go with their natural, savage, intuitive impulses and trust their gut.
And it's interesting, you've told me earlier in earlier emails that you've actually spoken before ASQ conferences, which is interesting because that's obviously the industry that we're involved with, Quality Digest is involved with, is quality. So it's interesting that you've actually talked to quality people, and you've said that quality problems are often people-related, but that quality professionals don't always understand how to deal with people versus analytical issues. And describe to us a little bit how that ties into the whole gut instinct sort of thing.
Of course, Dirk. So first of all, we have to understand where our gut instincts come from. And our gut intuitions, our gut instincts, what we feel comfortable with, are actually not evolved for the modern business environment. You'd be surprised, right? The modern business environment has been around only since the World War II, so not that much time for evolution to take place. They're actually evolved for the savanna environment, when we were hunters and gatherers living in small tribes of 15 to a maximum of 150 people. So a fundamental, very, very important aspect of our gut reactions is tribalism, which means We want to people who we respect and like to like us, and we don't want them to dislike us. So we have a lot of gut intuitions that cause us to not get into conflicts and fights and tensions with people who we perceive to be as part of our tribe. And that is the fundamental underlying reason why quality professionals suffer from so many difficulties. When I talk to ASQ folks, for example, at ASQ Harrisburg, other venues, what they tell me is that they look at the process, they look at what's going on, and they often notice, in the back of their minds, they note that, hey, we have a people problem here. People aren't following the appropriate process. They may sometimes not care about the process. They may not have buy-in into the process. The process may be good, but they're not actually doing the process. However, if they talk about people, they will go against people who are in their tribe, who are part of their tribe, and that causes them a lot of discomfort. Think of yourself as a quality professional. Have you ever run into a people problem and you've been uncomfortable talking about it, even though you know deep in your heart that that is the actual root of the issue? That's the kind of issue that quality professionals run into all the time. And they are not trained to deal with it, in part because they're not trained with how to overcome and manage these gut reactions that cause them to make really bad decisions about not addressing the actual root of the problem.
So not going, kind of not rocking the boat, like you said, not going against the tribe because you don't want to fall out with your peer group. So is that something that can you actually teach people how to do that then? How to get through that resistance to going against the flow?
Absolutely. So the first thing to understand is that these gut reactions are not indicative of the external truth. You may feel uncomfortable, like let's say people are anxious. Anxiety is a big, big problem in our society, and that's the kind of thing you're feeling, right? You're feeling at that moment. You're feeling anxious. Now, you're feeling anxious about threat to your social survival. In the tribal environment, if you went against your tribe, you might be thrown out of the tribe and you die. So it was very important for our ancestors to not get thrown out of the tribe, not rock the boat. And we have very strong impulses. We're the descendants of those people who survived by not rocking the boat. In the current business environment, if you don't rock the boat a little bit and point out some people problems that damage processes, you're going to really harm the company's bottom line. You're going to harm the project. You're going to harm the underlying issues. So the first thing to recognize is that your internal impulses are not indicative of an external threat, not necessarily indicative of an external threat. So that's the first thing. Understand awareness of your emotions, that emotional intelligence, which comes from that awareness and being able to manage your emotions, is the first step. The next step is to understand what actually is going to happen if you point out the people problem. Well, maybe this other person will be upset. So perhaps you don't point it out in a way that the other person will be upset. You ask about how can we collaborate on solving this apparent problem. And you point to the people problem, but you don't say, hey, it's your fault, Bob, you're the problem here. You say, hey, Bob, I've noticed that this is happening here. How can we work together to solve this issue? You don't say, here's the process, the process is a challenge. You don't focus on the process, you talk to Bob about Bob's behavior. So focus on the behavior, don't focus on Bob as a person. And you say, hey, I noticed that this is what you're behaving. Maybe there's something wrong with the process that is causing you to not follow it appropriately. What's going on here? So basically what you want to do is get yourself on the same side as this other tribal member, as Bob, and make sure that you work with Bob to fix the problem that is causing him to engage in the problematic behavior of not following the process that's undermining quality. So that's what you're going for. And you're not blaming Bob. You're saying, maybe there's something wrong with the process. Maybe there's something wrong with the systems that we have set up here. What's going on? So be curious, express curiosity, not hostility, and then work with Bob to problem solve. And you get yourself on the same side as Bob, and Bob likes you.
Do you have maybe an example of that without naming companies, but you're a consultant, so I'm sure you go into a lot of companies and you see exactly kind of what you described. Can you maybe bring what you just said down to earth a little bit by maybe giving a brief example?
Sure. So there was a company of around 600 technology professionals. in the Midwest. And there was a systematic problem of the technology professionals not following the new process of performance evaluation, performance management. And that was causing a lot of hassle. The HR department and the IT department created a new process of performance management, and they bought this new software and they tried to get people to use it. Now, the problem was the technology professionals, IT professionals who were part of the company, they didn't really want to use this new software. They were used to the old process. So the folks went to me and said, hey, how can we do this? This is a problem. Whatever we're trying to do, they're not actually engaging in the process. So we went and we observed what was happening there, what was happening with each individual. And we saw that what was actually going on is that the performance management interview, when they were doing the performance management, it was not conducive to the performance management process, to them putting the information into the online system that they created when they were during the performance management interview. They wanted the professionals, the technology professionals wanted to be able, the supervisors wanted to be able to write out what was happening, what was the situation with a person like, and they wanted to be able to sometimes, cross things off this person's record. They want to be able to change things around. They want to be able to not necessarily put in all the information into the performance management, into the final evaluation. So that was a major issue. And of course, the company wanted to track all the behaviors that were happening on the ground, but the supervisors weren't willing to do that. So they eventually, after talking to the supervisors, they were able to negotiate a compromise where the performance management process, the final evaluation that was given at the end of the year, they were able to edit it until the end. So they were able to take some things out that they originally put in based on whether the persons whose performance they were evaluating improved or not. So that was kind of the resolution to the situation. They worked with these supervisors. They didn't tell the supervisors, you must use this. They worked with these supervisors to address their concerns, to evaluate why they were having the concerns, and then they fixed the problem going forward.
So that sounds kind of like in that case, kind of a systemic issue. What about issues that are related to maybe just simply poor communication, and I guess getting back kind of to the gut reaction, and that's where I think a lot of the gut reaction comes in, as you were saying earlier, is kind of this interpersonal, relationships, communication. Some people don't feel comfortable communicating maybe in a forthright way, just because they don't feel comfortable with it. Again, getting back to that kind of that gut reaction. How much of what you see is systemic related versus poor communication, or maybe reluctant communication?
Well, that example, just to be very clear, was based on poor communication. They weren't getting the information from the supervisors. They didn't actually evaluate what was the challenges that caused the supervisors to not use the systems. They thought that supervisors were just reluctant to use the systems because it's a new thing and they weren't bought into the process. But there was an actual problem with the process. So that's one example. Let me give you another example. So there was a supervisor in the quality department who, well, actually the head of supervising, who hired an employee. And that employee was quite problematic according to other people in the department. And that employee wasn't performing very well. So then I was already doing consulting engagement there, and they asked me to help this supervisor recognize that the employee wasn't performing well, because the supervisor wouldn't take their information, the supervisor wouldn't listen to them, and they couldn't communicate this information effectively to the supervisor. And I talked to the supervisor. I figured out, hey, what's going on here? Kind of what are your goals for the department? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to see happen here? And the supervisor talked about how they wanted to really build a department to be really effective, quality, and they were worried about if they didn't have the sufficient employees, that they wouldn't get money for hiring a new employee. And that was when I saw the underlying challenge of what's going on. So I talked to this person, the supervisor, and said, hey, totally understand. You don't want to let go of any employees because you're worried about the budget being cut and not getting a new person. But what about all these people quality people who are kind of getting potentially disenchanted and worried about what happens when they're working with somebody in the quality department who is not very quality performer, who doesn't really do a good job? there's a lot of research showing that such people bring down the overall productivity of the team, and they undermine retention. So good people are likely to leave in the long term if you don't get rid of people who are poor performance. So after having that conversation, after having that information, the supervisor was able to change his mind and really go to the poor performer and have some serious conversations with the poor performer and get him on a track record of, hey, you're gonna be placed on probation for the next 3 months until we see improvement, and then we'll take you off probation. So that was an example of where you figure out what are a person's challenges using curiosity. You figure out what is going on, what is the challenge that this person is not solving that they should be solving with the performer who they're evaluating, and then how do you address that going forward? You point out to them how their behaviors will undermine the long-term future of their department, of their goals, if they continue to not address the problems in the department.
Okay, now, in your book, Never Go With Your Gut, you have in there, I believe, 8 steps for making better decisions. Can you maybe highlight one of those? What do you think is maybe the key thing that employers or supervisors can do to help them make better decisions? If you had to pick one.
Sure. It's hard to pick one, of course. The thing that has been most problematic, according to the research on this topic, so my background obviously is in cognitive neuroscience, behavioral economics, is that people don't tend to generate enough options, viable options. Why is that? So because everyone in business tends to settle. They settle for the first acceptable option, and then they go forward because they have a lot of decisions to make. They don't think about the long-term consequences, sufficiently think about the long-term consequences of picking the first acceptable option. Sometimes, very often, actually, according to the research, it's a bad idea to settle for the first acceptable option. What you really need to do is generate more, at least 3, ideally 5 viable options, things that you can really choose among if it's a significant decision. If you're hiring, the CEO of a company or someone in the C-suite, if you're beginning a really serious new project, launching a new project, if you're doing a major change, like let's say database management, you're changing to a new database, you want to very much choose not the first acceptable option, but choose among a number of options, generate more options than seem intuitively comfortable to you, because otherwise you will most likely harm the company, harm the organization, harm your career going down the road by not picking an option that is good enough.
Okay. I want you to give you a chance to describe to our viewers what your book, Never Go With Your Gut, what you're trying to accomplish with this, and what you believe or what you want readers to come away with from reading your book. What's the goal there?
Sure. So the first thing from the quality perspective, what I want to mention is that the book talks about cognitive biases, the dangerous judgment errors that we all make as human beings because of how our brains are wired, due to our evolutionary background and other factors. So what quality folks have really what they find helpful is this analytical approach to looking at the human brain and the 30 most dangerous cognitive biases that cause us a lot of damage in our decisions and how we can address them. So the book focuses on, hey, these are the errors, here's how we can address them, and this is how we can make the wisest and most profitable decisions. So that's what quality folks have been most helped by in this book. For more broadly, what I want to accomplish with this book is, of course, to help people make better decisions and avoid decision disasters. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what all of my work is about. My passion at baseline is utilitarian. I want the most good for the most number. And I think I can do that by helping people make the best decisions possible. So that's what the point of my book is. That's what I want to accomplish. And that's what the people say who read the book and use the techniques. So I'm very pleased with that.
Excellent. Okay, well, Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts and author of Never Go With Your Gut. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Dirk. It's been a pleasure.
And we do have a link to Never Go With Your Gut down below the player page down there. You can click on that link. I believe it links out to Amazon, and you can download that book, read it. buy it, obviously. And that is it for today. As usual, if there is something or someone you would like us to bring on the show, or some topic you would like us to cover, send those ideas to us at qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll do our best to get those topics on the show. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you at the next QDL. So long.